Hello and welcome to the Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now this weekend I was fortunate enough to attend my first 9th edition tournament. It was a one-day event, 16 people, and let me tell you, it was great to be back out on the competitive scene again. And what I'm going to do in today's video is take you through step by step, blow by blow, the games that I played, the lists that I came across, and my general impressions of the competitive meta now that I've basically dived in head first in the deep end. So without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. Now the first thing I want to do is say a huge thank you to the tournament organisers at The Honest Wargamer for hosting an absolutely fantastic event. The event was called the Captain's Clash. It was the first one that they've done in that venue, and let me tell you straight off the bat, I highly recommend it. I am going to be going back there. I think they've got another one in July. If I can squeeze it in some of the other events that I'm going to, I will certainly be considering going along, and I highly recommend other people go and check the event out. The venue, really well put together, competitive gaming scene, and I mean that. They had video cameras, webcams set up above many of the tables. You could see they were considering, or going for putting them above all the tables so they could stream at the very least all the top tables, but more than likely they could probably stream all the games that would be going on in the event. Now it is a smaller venue. It could probably, even without COVID restrictions, it could probably only really host sort of a 16 person event, but that's absolutely fine. They have a control room for the video stuff. That it wasn't up and running for this event, but I think they're planning on getting it up and running fairly soon. Other thing to mention is really great just atmosphere, really great service. They had a little bar. They had free tea and coffee throughout the whole day, and they had table service. And they came out and checked on you at least 2 or 3 times every game. It was just really, they were just really on it. And I think by being a bit of a smaller venue, they could definitely provide a higher quality service. With many events that I've been to in the past, tournament organisers have been obsessed with getting more people through the doors. More people, just as many people as they can get. With this venue, I definitely felt like they'd gone the other way. They went for very much a high quality, everything being as best as they could make it sort of event, but not just trying to cram people in like sardines. And I tell you what, it was very refreshing and I really enjoyed it. Something to be said for doing one thing very well rather than lots of things, not very well. That's coming from the guard player as well. Quantity has a quality of its own and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, overall, really high quality event. Small event, you can be more sort of intimate, more on top of it. Highly recommend it. I'll be going back again, no doubt about it. They're doing another event in July. If I can make it, I've already got one event in July, but if I can make it, I'm going to go back. It's as simple as that. And I really hope that they do keep up the monthly events because I'm going to keep going. If they keep hosting them, I'll keep going to them. So yeah, without further ado, let's get on to the actual nitty gritty of the event now. And the best place to start is with what army I took. Okay, so we're going to go through my army list now. Now I have done a video on this army already, so there will be a link at the end of the video to that other video that I've done, so you can see the army fully laid out. I'm also going to put a link down in the description below, so you can see the full text version of the list. So suffice to say, I took my pure infantry Mordian 50th rifles. Okay. 260 bodies in total. That's every officer, that's every conscript. 260 infantry models on the table. I will go through like a condensed version of the list because it's a lot of guys. So basically, I took 3 battalions. Every single battalion had the same regiment trait: wilderness survivors and disciplined shooters. For those that don't know, wilderness survivors means if you don't advance, you count as being in cover, and for disciplined shooters it means you have an 18-inch rapid fire range. Now in those 3 battalions I had 12 infantry squads. Every single infantry squad had a plasma gun. I then had 3 blocks of conscripts. 2 of them were full at 30. One of them I had 26 conscripts. I had to shave 4 off, essentially. I had to save 20 points. I thought rather than messing around with equipment, just take 4 conscripts off. I'm already running 200 plus guys. Then, so that's 15 troop choices. Then for my remaining 3 troop choices that I had over the 3 battalions, I took 3 squads of Scions. Each Scion squad had the free plasma pistol on the sergeant. He also had a chainsword. And I also had 2 of them had double plasma gun and the 2 hotshot lasguns. And the other one, the final one, had 2 Melta guns. Now originally I had wanted to take Tempestor Command Squads, but Tempestor Command Squads are 80 points a pop, whereas regular Scion Squads are 65 points a pop with those 2 special weapons in them, you know, Melta or Plasma. So I had to shave points. So that's sort of that's the troops, but the line infantry was, you know, 12 infantry squads and 86 conscripts. Then the special drop troopers started with the Scions, and then I also had, for special weapon caddies, I had 3 regular command squads. Each of these had 4 special weapons. 2 of them had 4 Melta guns, and 1 of them had 4 plasma guns. And then I had 3 special weapon squads because I wanted more special weapons. And these were the cheapest way of bringing them, honestly. So I had 2 special weapon squads with triple Melta and 1 special weapon squad with triple plasma. Now, why am I taking Melta guns when my regiment trait, disciplined shooters, I could have an 18-inch rapid fire if I just took everyone with plasma? That is true, but as some of you have seen in my more recent battle reports, I have taken all plasma all the way, and it has been a problem. You need some Melta, okay? And I figured I already had plasma guns in every single infantry squad, so you know what would be better? Having Melta represented in the special weapon squads and the command squads, essentially. So that's why I had those special weapon squads loaded out with more Melta. I then had, in terms of officers, 3 company commanders, 1 with Kurovs Aquila, 1 with the Warlord Trait, Master of Command, so I could do an extra order. The one which had the extra order, Master of Commander, he outflanked every game with the 3 command squads that he could order every single one of them, and they just came in from a flank and just unleashed all hell. And then I had 2 Tempestor Primes, 1 with the command rod and the 1 bare bones. And at first I was like, oh, I need to shave 5 more points off for these 2 command rods. And then I realised I don't need 2 command rods because I only have 3 squads of Scions. So I don't need 2 command rods. I only need 3 orders. So that was quite, that sometimes it's important not to just be on autopilot. That's something I realised there. I then had 3 platoon commanders, so I had 3 company commanders, 3 platoon commanders, 2 Tempestor Primes, and for my last HQ choice, I had Aradia Medellan, the special Blackstone Fortress Psyker. And again, the reason I took her is she is 5 points cheaper than a regular Primaire Psyker. So why wouldn't I take her? Okay, now just to go through a little bit of the list, it's fairly obvious what I wanted to do. Flood the board with bodies. The game plan was, deny the enemy primary while scoring a shitload myself. Focus on secondaries that I could score without really having to interact with my opponent. And, my opponents might do really well on their secondaries, but if I can just deny them primary, then we've got a chance. In terms of character selection, platoon commanders and company commanders, that makes sense. Same with Tempestor Primes. I took the Psyker because I wanted to unlock Warp Ritual as a secondary. Now, I might as well go through this now. I never ended up taking Warp Ritual. Simple fact of the matter was, in my first 2 games, my opponents had a Psyker who could easily have denied me attempting to get Warp Ritual off. And the 3rd game, I ended up playing against Dark Eldar, who had no issue with assassinating characters, so it wasn't worth it there either. So bit of a funny one, bit of an interesting one. I don't think I would take a Psyker again. I was a bit disappointed from a fluff perspective. I was a bit disappointed that I took the Psyker because the more infantry rifles aren't really meant to take them. But in a funny sort of way, if it didn't do anything all game, it's not it's not the end of the world. But I was playing competitively. I wasn't messing around. When I'm playing fluff games in the battle bunker, I won't bring any Psykers. we're going to a tournament, I can't put these self-imposed fluff reasons on myself, because I'm meant to be playing competitively and bringing that information back to you guys. So I've just got to play competitively. So there we go. Now, so that was the army list. That was the game plan. Let's go through some of the tables, the terrain, and my first game. So we'll go through that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw up 3 pictures, one after the other here, of some of the terrain that I saw at the event, and to give you an idea of what the tables were like. So straight out the bat, basically, guys, they were doing what I would call like meta terrain. So you had forests, and you had big L shapes, and you had line of sight blocking terrain. That's what you had. Very much along the WTC format. And I have to say, overall, I was really impressed with the quality of the terrain. Again, one thing I want to get across with this event, and using the terrain as kind of to make my point, which is this was not a fluffy bunny event. What you'll typically find with these smaller 16-man events is you would expect them to be more local, with, you've got the local orc player that turns up, the local NID player, and then you have like maybe 4 or 5 people from out of town, for lack of a better word, coming along with their competitive stuff. The people that just go to every event in the country. Not so at this event. This was 16 people, and every single one of them, nearly every single one of them turned up with a proper cutthroat list. So you had, for example, out of the 16 people, you'd have 4 people there that I would describe brought fun lists or less competitive factions, and 3 of them were Imperial Guard players, including myself. And you had 1 World Eaters player. Now I actually went along to this event with one of my friends, someone I actually met through like doing YouTube and Morning Glory stuff, Wargamer Alex, and it was his first event, and I kind of persuaded him, come on man, come down, you got to cut your teeth on an event, you're always bitching about 40k and you're never playing it, come on, cut your teeth. And he absolutely loved it. And it was funny, I came down with pure infantry and he came down with pure tanks. So between us, we had a balanced force. And we kind of said, let's see how it goes and see which player does better. Because he literally had 14 models in his army, and one of which was a Machias Vanquisher. So it was really interesting having those 2 very different lists. And then there was the 3rd player, who really nice guy called John. I've actually seen him around at some other events before. I don't know if he recognised me, but I recognised him. And he had a combined arms force. So I see him with a very similar list sort of each time. So he knows what he's doing. And we're all 3 of us, had an absolutely fantastic time. But I'm not sure where John ended up placing, but I think he did quite well with his combined arms guard. But yeah, for me and Alex, it was a bit of a case of he's the treadhead, I'm the infantry guy. Let's see who does better overall. But for everyone else at that event, you had the 3 guard players and the World Eater, and then the remaining 75% of players either had Marines, Death Guard, or Dark Eldar. And when we're talking like Marines, we're talking Blood Angels, Sanguinary Guard spam, good stuff. We're talking, I don't think I saw Marinus there that didn't have at least 2 Volkite Contemptor Dreadnoughts, for example. Okay, so no one, cover your children's ears, no one was fucking around. Okay, pardon my language, but no one was messing around. You had the Death Guard list, basically all 3 of them were the same, where you had a big mass of about between 40 and 60 Poxwalkers, 2 Volkite Contemptor Dreads, every single one of them had Volkite Contemptor Dreads, and then you had, in one form or another, 20 Terminators, either Blight Lords or Death Shrouds. That's what you had, okay? And then they were seasoned with whatever supporting characters you felt like. Every single one of them had a Tallyman, for example. So what I'm saying is, like, all of the Death Guard list there were competitive, okay? You had Dark Eldar there. Okay, and then in terms of Marines, you had things like Blood Angel, Sanguinary Guard spam, you had Volkite Contemptor Dreadnoughts there, and you had Dark Angels with the nigh on unkillable you know, Inner Circle Knight, Inner Circle Deathwing, I score 45 secondaries, I'll get into this in a minute, I score max secondaries before the game begins list. So to give you a really clear idea, every list there, you know, pretty much, you know, sorry, 75% of the list, shouldn't exaggerate, 75% of the list there were hardcore, proper lists. Not net lists in a negative way, but just like what lists you would expect to see at a proper event. And then you had combined that with the really meta terrain, the WTC style terrain, and you had what I would describe as a small yet very intense tournament. You know, any of those lists that you saw were like top tier. You did have Custodies turn up, but we're talking like Telemon Dreadnoughts left, right, and centre. You know, so even with the nerf, they're doing. You know, there was one Custodies player who I think ended up coming like second or third. He did really, really well. So, you know, I think all the lists were really, really powerful. But by and large, you know, it was Marines, Death Guard, Dark Eldar. You know, that was it. You know, so that was 75% of the list were hardcore. So that's the terrain, and that's kind of like what the player base and the quality of play. Everyone there was pretty experienced. You know, apart from like, you know, Alex, who was his first 9th edition tournament, first tournament, and you know, myself, who was like my first 9th edition tournament. Everyone there was pretty experienced and was running pretty hardcore lists. So hopefully you've got an idea for the venue, you've got an idea for what I was running, you've got an idea for the terrain and what other people were running. Let's stop messing around. Let's get into the blow-by-blow games of get the 3 games that I played. So round 1, straight out of the gate, we're going into a competitive Death Guard list. I want to say a huge thank you to I played 2 Johns actually. Played 1 John game 1 and 1 John game 2. All my opponents were fantastic this event. So that goes without saying. So I want to say a huge thank you to my first opponent, being an absolute gent, and for bringing his A game. You know, this guy brought a really strong Death Guard list. 2 big squads of Death Shroud Terminators, a squad of Blightlord Terminators, 2 Volkite Contemptor Dreadnoughts, all the supporting characters, and about 60 Poxwalkers. I think he, you know, like me, he trimmed some out from one squad, and I trimmed some conscripts out. But you know what I mean? Like, he's bringing, you know, 3 blocks of Poxwalkers. The mission was Vital Intelligence, which is the one where there are 6 objectives, 4 in No Man's Land, 1 in each deployment zone, but you've got to control 2 to even get any primary points. In terms of secondaries, I made a slight mistake. I dithered, and I took Raise the Banners. And in hindsight, I most certainly should have taken Retrieve Octarius Data. I would have got more points for it. But I just wanted, in my game plan, it was all about Retrieve Octarius Data, and then I dithered. And it probably would have made a difference, but we'll see. You know, I'll go through it. So I took Banners, I took Engage on All Fronts, and I took the mission-specific one. And my opponent took Spread the Sickness. I can't remember what one of them was, and he also took the Data Retrieval one, the mission-specific one. Now, this was a really interesting game. My opponent went first and basically like marched out, and then I got a taste for what Volkite Contemptors could do, and they're absolutely filthy. And you know, they're 150 points for 16 Volkite shots, really, really strong. And yeah, so my opponent started chipping away at the guard. His deployment was one big line, you know, with Death Shrouds on the board, Poxwalkers on the flanks. He had a unit of 5 Plague Marines as well, I should say. My deployment was conscripts up front, infantry squads at back, and my plan was just flood that middle of the board, and by and large it went pretty well. So the thing is, my opponent went, just to be clear, neither one of us scored basically any points for the mission specific secondary. Neither one of us did that. My opponent did manage to spread the sickness like 3 times, but that was it. He only managed to spread it like 3 times, so we got like 9 points for it. And then, yeah, basically, no one scored any primary victory points the whole game, apart from at the end, when I managed to get some primary victory points. Because my opponent went first, moved on to the objectives, and then in my turn, I moved on to the objectives as well. And I had more bodies and more OBSEC than my opponent. So it comes around to his. This happened every single turn. It goes back to him in his turn 2, and he doesn't control enough objective to score any primary points. So he doesn't get any primary. And then it comes back to but he clears me off the objectives. So then I don't have any primary points. But then in my turn 2, I move back on. Rinse and repeat. So my opponent ended up scoring a little bit better on his secondaries because he had things like spread sickness, and I just got like 5 victory points for raise the banners at the end of the game. Because I just had the one banner basically the whole game. And my opponent was ahead on victory points all game, and I thought he had it in the bag. And then it came round to the last turn. And my opponent had managed to get a couple of turns of primary. He managed to get 5 victory points on one turn and 5 victory points on another turn. So then it came back to me, and I don't think I'd got any primary at this point, but it was the last turn. So I was able to move on to some objectives in turn 5 and score 10 primary. So what ended up happening is we both only scored a total of 25 points plus painting score. It was the lowest scoring round of the whole tournament because we both only got 35 points. And we got a draw. Amazingly, we got a draw. Tournament organisers came over, checked everything because it's so rare to get a draw in competitive, in 40k in general. But it was a bang-up draw. 35 points. Very few, really low scoring game. Me and my opponent chatted about it afterwards, and I said, you should probably have taken no prisoners against me. And he went, yeah, I probably should have done. And then he said, you probably should have taken assassinate against me because you would have maxed that out. And I was like, yeah, so it wouldn't have really made a difference, I guess. And he was like, no, it wouldn't have made a difference at all. So that's kind of interesting. So in terms of how did the list perform? Well, it did exactly what it was meant to do. I kept pushing on to objectives. I kept moving people up the board. It's so good, move. You just absolutely just smash your way across the table, and you just take objectives off your opponent every single turn. It's really, really good. And did it in every single game where I basically just denied my opponent's primary nearly every game. In terms of how the list worked, I know there was some speculation when I did my video earlier in the week about how this is going to perform. There was some speculation as how would the special weapon spam work, how would waiting until turn 2 to bring stuff on work. Absolutely fine. I had enough bodies to take a punch in the face, and even though my opponent went first, so I had to take 2 punches in the face, his turn 1 and his turn 2, my special weapons came in, and by the end of turn 3 I deleted all his Blightlord Terminators. Not Blightlord, all his Death Shrouds. I had taken significant chunks out of all his Poxwalkers. So when it actually came down to the dust had settled, I probably had about 80 or so infantry left. Roughly, maybe 60 to 80 infantry left. And my opponent had like a unit, like some Poxwalkers and maybe a character, or he had basically some Poxwalkers, a character, and 2 Volkite Contemptor Dreads. And maybe 1 Blightlord and 1 Plague Marine left. It was, both sides were bloodied. I'd taken about 200 casualties, and he had probably about 20 or 30 Poxwalkers left at most. I'd say about 20, and a handful of dreadnoughts, stuff like that. So both sides absolutely beating the crap out of each other. And the special weapons performed really well. He pushed forward with his Death Shroud. I came on, and this is where taking the Melta really shined through, because there was plenty of times when my plasma was not cutting it. My plasma Scions, my plasma in my infantry squads, and the Melta command squads came in and just was like eat lead, and just absolutely just melted the crap. I suppose it's not eat lead, eat supercharged heated beam, and just absolutely melted. Two veteran command squads with plasma and a special weapons squad with Melta, and a special weapons squad with Melta just deleted a full squad of Death Shrouds. Gone. Absolutely gone. So that was just really, really good. So big, even though there was many times in this tournament when only having a 12-inch range on the Melta really sucked, every game it was better to have Melta in that situation. Variety, spice of life, you can't just spam all plasma. Melta's good. So that was the first game. And my list had done what it wanted to do, and I was ecstatic. I was over the moon, because no matter what happened now, I wasn't going 0 and 3. I wasn't losing every single game. And I had gone into this event, I guess I'd almost voodooed myself. And for those of you that follow this channel, you know what I mean by voodooing. Like I freaked myself out. Because I was so used to just hearing and even repeating myself the lies, the mantra about, you know, guard being bottom table and all this kind of stuff. And then my first game, I'd gone against what I think is basically, you know, the net list of competitive Death Guard, and I'd smashed it. You know, I'd taken the toughest, most attritional list out there, that, you know, enemy list out there, you know, the Death Guard, and I'd out attrition them. You know, I had played them at their own game, and I'd managed to get a draw. So no matter what happened, I wasn't going to go away completely whitewashed. So I was really happy. You know, the guard, you know, all those theories that I've had, you know, about, you know, when we've been in lockdown, about how the pure infantry had performed, how the pure infantry should perform, how it can play the mission and all that kind of stuff, it worked. And the great thing about this list, and this will be repeated in the other two games, the great thing about this list is that it wasn't just me moving on to objectives and dying. I had firepower. So it meant that it was good for me because I felt like I could actually kill things, and it was good for my opponent because it wasn't just boring, just killing waves of guardsmen and them not doing any damage to you. It was a nice balance of firepower and, you know, guard swarm, and it worked really, really well. So that was the end of game one. You know, on top of the world, didn't really matter what happened now, and then it was like, you know what? Time to go into game two. And if I thought game one was a competitive list, then oh boy, was I in for a hell of a time with game two. So game two rolls around, and, you know, like I said, I thought the last list was powerful. This list is one that I have faced before, and it is an absolute doozy of a list. Okay, it's Dark Angels in a circle, and it basically starts the game in most situations with a guaranteed 40 secondaries, typically. So when you're going up against that kind of stuff, when you know, it's so difficult to deny your opponent like his secondaries and whatnot, then, you know, it's tough. But so to explain the list that my opponent had, essentially what you do is you take 2 blocks of Terminators. It doesn't really matter which ones you just take 2 blocks of Terminators. And because they're Deathwing Terminators, or in a circle, then, you know, then they get permanent transhuman, which means you will only ever win them on 4s. So you take 2 blocks of those, and they're like 300 to 400 points per block. But then you take While We Stand We Fight. Now I think it's changed the name now, but it's the one where if your units are alive, you get, like, you know, victory points. And then you take 2 Talon Masters. One of them you zip around like killing stuff, and the other one you make the 3rd unit for While We Stand We Fight. And basically, your opponent is never going to chew through all those Terminators, and he can't touch the other Talon Master, which means you're guaranteed 15 points. In theory, you're guaranteed 15 points for that secondary. And then, because you're obsec on your Terminators, one of those blocks of Terminators sits with, you know, one with guns, sits at the back and sits on your home objective, and you go for Stubborn Defiance, which is the Dark Angel strat, where basically if you hold your home objective the whole game, you'll get 15 victory points. Now you can interrupt that cycle, you can deny it, but it's very, very difficult, because the way, if you take a big block of 10 of these Terminators, you can ring them around an objective so an opponent can't physically, like, get to them. So really, really, you know, really strong list, you know. So you basically start with those 30 primary, then you pick a secondary like, you know, Banners, or in this case my opponent picked Direct Assault, and again, because you're obsec with Terminators, you're guaranteed to get some points there, either through Banners or through you know, the mission specific one. And then you take my opponent in this case, so he had those 2 blocks of Terminators, he had those 2 Talon Masters, he then had some support catches. So you've got one that puts -1 damage on one of your blocks of Terminators. You've got an Apothecary for getting people back up. You've got Azrael, you've got Ezekiel, and you have a bodyguard Terminator unit, so you can't target any of those characters when they're within range 3 inches of the bodyguard unit. And then you take 3 attack bites, and if I didn't mention it, you take a Volkite Contender Dreadnought. So the total model count for the armies, for this case, was 33. So I almost had more in one blob of conscripts. I literally almost outnumbered this guy, almost 10 to 1. Alright? And this list is super hard to kill because it gets Terminators back. The Terminators are really hard to kill. You've got Storm Shields, you've got you've got inbuilt Transhuman, you've got 6 up Feel No Pain, you've got getting one of the bastards back up with Selfless Healer, all that kind of stuff. So the Terminators are dead hard to kill, and that's what this list does. It's almost impossible to kill. Okay, and it relies upon basically max, sitting on 2 objectives all game, getting 40 primary points for doing that, and then getting at least 40 points on secondaries, and then 10 painting score. And basically, if you play your cards right with this list, you're walking into most games with a guaranteed 90 victory points, and your opponent has to kind of stop you from achieving those victory points. It's very difficult because your opponent can spend all game trying to score their own ones, but they've got to try and score 91 to beat you, which is very difficult, very high scoring. So this time the mission was sweep and clear. So that's one where there's 5 objectives, 3 in the middle, 1 in each deployment zone, and it is table quarters deployment with the big circle in the middle. And my opponent took Stubborn Defiance, my opponent took While We Stand We Fight, very predictable, and he took Direct Assault because he was basically going to walk into the middle of the board and then control that for 5 turns and max out Direct Assault. That was his plan. And my objectives, I took Retrieve Octarius Data, I took Engage on All Fronts, and I also took Direct Assault. And so I went first, and I almost made a key mistake. I almost just banzaied up the table with everyone. And I realised that I didn't want to do that, because I didn't want to slingshot his Terminators into my lines turn 1. Because if I just move up with everyone to try and get Direct Assault turn 1, then what my opponent will do is simply move forward and then charge into my conscripts, sweep them all away, kill give him too many kills in turn 1, and then he gets Direct Assault back. So what I did was I gave up scoring Direct Assault turn 1, and I stayed 17 inches away from my opponent. Okay, and that was my turn 1, and then I did some damage here and there, which he basically healed with his Apothecary. But my turn 1, I basically did very little damage. But what I did do is I moved 20 guardsmen onto one objective. I had 20 guardsmen holding my back to the objective, and I started moving guardsmen round onto the right-hand objective, and I had about 10 guardsmen there, turn 1. Now my opponent's turn, he moved forward and he advanced with his Terminators, and he managed to get Direct Assault, but he couldn't charge me. And then he managed to take one of the objectives off me, the one that only had 10 guardsmen. Like, he zipped over his Talon Master, blasted them all free, and then zipped back with a stratagem, and then put himself near the bodyguard so I couldn't target the Talon Master. Because you just can't target the character if it's in range of the bodyguard. It's not, even if you're near it, doesn't matter, you just can't target them. So it then comes around to my turn. It's like, oh well, I'm going to score, turn 2, I'm going to score 10 primary, and so what I do is I just want to deny my opponent primary. So at this point, he's going to get the charge off on me anyway, if he wants to, because he's near enough. This point, I just moved 30 conscripts onto the middle objective. Just moved 30 conscripts onto it, because he was just touching it with one of his bases. He hadn't got a good advance roll. I just moved 30 conscripts onto it, and I'm like, right, so now I'm going to score Direct Assault, because I control the middle objective, and you're going to get 5 primary points next turn. That's all you're going to get. And then I moved some more guardsmen onto the right-hand objective, because the left-hand one, from this perspective of this picture, already had 20 guys on it, so I didn't worry about it. And then I'm like, right, what I can see is going to happen here is he's going to keep trying to blast me off that other the right-hand objective. But if I have enough reserves to pull 30 guys onto it, if I have 20 guys onto it one turn, he basically can't clear me off. And I realise I have to kill that that bodyguard and that Talon Master. So what I do in my turn 2 is, like I said, I start moving more people from the left over to the centre, because I realise he's not going to go that way, he's not going to threaten it. I start moving some more guardsmen to hold the right hand objective. I've got 30 conscripts in range of the middle objective with 60 more on the way from the various flanks. I drop down. I'd already got retrieval trials data in my home table quarter. I drop down into his backfield quarter, just very far in the back with a unit of 5 Scions, and get retrieval trials data there. And then I come in with my Scions and my command squads, but I leave off the special weapon squads. Sorry, I leave off 2 of the special weapon squads this turn. Okay, because I couldn't get the Melta in range, basically. In fact, yeah. And then what I do is I manage to delete the bodyguards in turn 2. I kill the bodyguards, but I don't manage to get... and I get the Talon Master, so I did get it. So I get rid of that threat. Then it comes round to turn 3, and it's like, okay, so now it's like, he hasn't got the bodyguards protected characters. One of the Talon Masters is dead. Great. That means he's got to basically protect the Talon Master because it's worthwhile with we fight. But he, at that point in his turn 2, just smashes 30 conscripts off the middle objective. Just smashes it. But he only gets 5 primary points, and he gets direct assault. Then it comes down to my turn 2. Sorry, turn 3, because I went first. My turn 3, I bring on more command squads, because interestingly, he hadn't targeted my special weapons pretty much at all in his turn, because he needed to clear off all the conscripts in the middle objective. Which meant that I'm now running rampant with those Scion, special weapons squads, and command squads, and I just start laying the hurt into him. So his attack bikes go. You know, his... Sorry, that was what happened. I have got mixed up. Turn 2, I delete his attack bikes. Turn 3, I delete the bodyguard, and I delete the Talon Master. That's what I did turn 3. And at that point, it's like, okay, his army now consists of a Talon Master, which he's got to protect, 10 Terminators, which I've got to sit at the back. So basically, all he's pressuring me with, really, is 10 Assault Terminators. And those 10 Assault Terminators are facing down the better part of 200 infantry. So interestingly, what basically happens over the rest of the game is I deny him primary all game. He gets, even with the last minute snatch and grab, he can't clear me off because I've got 30 guardsmen sat on one objective, and I've got 20 guardsmen sat on an objective he's nowhere near, and I've got the remaining, you know, out of 260 guys, I've got the remaining 210 all game just focusing on the middle objective. And I am able to use my Psyker to smite down his Terminators. I get smite off 2 turns in a row. Each time I do 3 wounds with it and just kill a Terminator. And once the dust, as those Terminators start falling, their ability to contest the objective falls as well, because they're only 5 models, and I can always throw more objectives onto the middle. So then he starts struggling to get direct assault, because he's not clearing me off, because he's not got that much. He throws all his characters into the mix, and I end up killing them all. I end up killing all his characters, because, apart from the Talon Master, because, you know, Azrael gets taken out by basically 20 guardsmen and some, you know, some Scions. Ezekiel goes down to the Scions and special weapons squads. The Apothecary dies, and the Banner guy dies. Just again to command squads running rampant over 5 turns, because he can't. Because I'm using, because they're so small, he can't see the command squads. Because I just put them behind one bit of line of sight blocking terrain, jump out the net in my turn, meld to something, and he can't see it. And he does end up, you know, don't get me wrong, he does end up killing the Scions, he does end up killing some of the special weapon squads. But basically, you know, the 2 Melta command squads are left unfazed all game. And when the dust settles, my opponent has maxed out While We Stand We Fight. He's maxed out Summon Defiance, but he's only got like 9 points for direct assault. And he's only got like 20 points for primary. So what has he got? 30 points, 39 points, 59 points, and then he got 10 Painsaw, so he got 69 points, giggity. So, you know, he got like 69 points, but then it comes to my turn, my end score, I max out primary. I get 45. I then max out Octarius data because he can't stop me because he hasn't got great board presence. You know, he hasn't really got any screening. So then I'm already on 45 plus painting, 55 plus max out Rod. So I'm on like 67 points. Then I max out engageable fronts nearly. I think I dropped 1 point from engageable fronts. So I'm already ahead. Then I like get 12 points on direct assault. Or 15 points. Yeah, I maxed direct assault. So the final score for me, I kid you not, is 93 points. I absolutely smashed it. Not to wank myself off, not to break my arm, jerk myself off, but I absolutely smashed it. And what was really interesting going into this game is, and by the way, my opponent, absolutely fantastic bloke. You know, really, really down to earth, super chill, had a great laugh. What was really interesting is, and this was the case for both me and my opponent, we both sort of went into this game being like, oh, you know, it's Guard, oh, you know, top tier competitive Dark Angels list, bit of a foregone conclusion. But then we got to turn 3 and my opponent was like, my opponent's, you know, sort of, by the way, not in a negative way, my opponent went from sort of taking the game very casually to, holy shit, I need to win. Like, this Guard army is running away with the points. And I'm achieving my secondaries, but I can't do dick on primary. You know, and again, he wasn't negative. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't being salty or negative. You could just see the switch in his head flick from, you know, oh, I'm running this top tier list to, oh, something is going wrong here. And turn 4 and 5 were really like cerebral for my opponent, and were really like, you could see, like, it was very interesting because he was, I think he was a Team England player, had a Team England, you know, 40k ITC Team England top on. And it was, what for me was really interesting, you could see that switch come on. And he was like, and like I said, I can't say this again, he wasn't being wacko, he wasn't being a dick, super chill, laughs all around, but you could see the way he carried himself, the way he moved, you know, it was game on. But at that point, unfortunately, he'd already lost. So, it was really, really interesting. The highlight of the match for me was when my conscripts, I got Aradia Medellan's power off on them, so they hit on +1. And then they accepted first rank fire, second rank fire. And I managed to gun down 2 assault terminators. Admittedly, one of them was only like on 1 wound, I think. But I managed to gun down 2 assault terminators with pure lasgun fire. It was super, super epic. And then those conscripts received a charge from a unit of terminators, managed to survive it, hold the objective, and deny my opponent direct assault. Honestly, my conscripts were probably, it's difficult to pick a unit of the tournament, but they consistently performed very, very well. So that was game number 2. Real doozy, really good game. So at this point, not only have I not gone 0 and 3, but I've actually technically got 2 positive scores under my belt, because a draw isn't a loss. You know, so it doesn't go down to like a negative score, it's just, you know. So technically at this point, I've got 2 positive scores under my belt. I've got a draw, and I've got a win. And I was expecting to go into the tournament at 0 and 3. So I was super happy with that. But then game 3 came around. And well, I'll show you what I went up against. Yep, that's right. I ended up facing the boogeyman, whatever you want to call it. I ended up facing Dark Eldar. The boogeyman. Anyway, I ended up facing Dark Eldar. I don't know how I ended up facing Dark Eldar, because this guy had won both of his games, like, big time. You know, like, he had won both of his games, like, I think 90 plus points. He was the only Dark Eldar player there, actually. I thought there was more than one, but he was the only one there. And then he comes across me, and I've fought my way up to the heady heights of table 2. And I guess how it works out, I mean, I guess at this point in the tournament, I must have been one of the 4 players who technically hadn't lost a game. Technically. I don't quite know how it would work out. If someone could, like, put the maths down below, you know, you've got 16 people, whatnot. But technically, I must have been one of the 4 players who hadn't lost a game at that point. So I ended up going up to table 2. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? Because I'm the guard guy who in round 3 has ended up on table 2 with what is quite frankly a bit of a meme list. You know, it's pure infantry. It's waves after waves of just guys with rifles and bayonets and balls and blood and guts. You know, that's what I'm running. And I come across the Dark Eldar player who is running... Well, it's Dark Eldar at the end of the day, guys. We've done a video on this. You know, we are not playing the same game system the Dark Eldar are. The Guard and the Dark Eldar, you know, I might as well be playing Age of Sigmar and he might as well be playing like Bolt Action or something. We are nowhere in the same game system. But what was it? And this guy had, you know, he had a really, really good Dark Eldar list. Now, it was a bit of a smorgasbord. You know, he had a real space raid and he had bikes. He had a Ravager, but not too many. You know, he had Trueborn Cabalites. And at first I thought, oh, this is a bit of a softer list. But as it went on, I realised that my opponent was very much a very experienced Dark Eldar player. He had come to the tournament to win. Fair play to him. You know, it wasn't the friendliest of games. That's not a negative whatsoever. My opponent just came along. He's like, I'm here to win. I'm going to play this game. I'm going to win. We're at a tournament. And that's what I want to do. And I was like, you know what? I know where I stand with that. I guess, you know, it's the last round. We're on table 2. It's less fun and games. I was joking. It's time to get a bit more serious. And I totally respected that from my opponent. You know, that's what he was here to do. And don't get the wrong end of the stick. Guy was really nice. We still had plenty of laughs and drinks and jokes and all that kind of stuff. Absolute top player. But the tone of the game, the way my opponent held himself, that switch was on from minute 1. You know, that competitive switch. Totally respect that from my opponent. He's come here to win, and he's brought the best Dark Eldar list, and he's already smashed his first 2 games. He was in a position to win the tournament, so I totally respect him. You know, trying hard, but not in a bad way. So absolutely, you know, huge props to my opponent, Mark. You know, I played 1 John, I played 2 Johns. I was really hoping to be able to play 3 Johns in a row, just because it would have been funny. But unfortunately, I ended up playing. That sounds really bad. But you know, my last opponent was called Mark. And you know, hats off to Mark, played an absolutely fantastic game with his Dark Eldar. And yeah, I mean, guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It was brutal. It was very evident that my opponent was playing a different game to me. He picked a secondary, heard the prey. He picked secondary, you know, fear. I can't remember what it was, 2 from the Dark Eldar book, basically, and that allowed him to just max out. You know, against, you know, I think the herd the prey one it's to do with table quarters, and there's one to do with morale, where for each model, not even unit that's destroyed, but model that's destroyed by morale, he gets a victory point. So he just maxed that out like turn 1, because he just took a little bit from every single squad, and then people ended up running away. So fair enough. But whilst it was a bit of a David and Goliath situation, and unfortunately, you know, Goliath was running around with a machine gun and David still only had a sling. It was a really interesting game, because for the first 3 turns, my opponent was doing well on secondary, but he took Assassinate, and I denied him Assassinate nearly all game. You know, and the first 3 turns, my opponent scored no primary points. Like, literally 0. Was it 0? No, sorry. The first 2 turns he scored 0, and then in his turn 3 he managed to get 10 primary points. And I was like, you know what? I've maxed out primary in my first 3 turns, sort of thing. You know, I've done really, really well. Obviously, you can't score at turn 1, but I've got 30 points in my turn 2 and turn 3, and going into my turn 4, I'm going to get the remaining 40, you know, I'm going to get 10 points in my turn 4, and I can at least get 5 points in my turn 5. So I'm going to max out primary here. My opponent's really struggling on primary, and he's struggling to get that last secondary. So I thought, you know what, that could be a bit of a chance here, and my opponent had to really work for it. And essentially, again, what was happening, guys, was turn 1, I was just moving on to objectives. I was dominating objectives. I had taken engagement fronts. I had taken retrieval towards data, and interestingly, I had taken no prisoners, because my opponent had lots of wounds. He had lots of infantry, and I was doing okay on that. You know, by the end of turn 3, I was looking at sort of 5 or 6 points for no prisoners, and it was going quite well. But unfortunately, guys, we couldn't keep it up. Dark Eldar just have even from small squads, even from relatively like shattered units, you know, like 3 or 4 witches, they just have such damage output that even a unit of like 3 or 4 witches could just go into a squad of 10 guardsmen and just clear it out. Just absolutely clear it out. And so what ended up happening was, unlike in the other 2 games where I'd managed to sort of, you know, delete some of my opponent's heavy hitters and then, you know, with my special weapons, and then that allowed me to like out attrition them, I simply couldn't do it with Dark Eldar. I couldn't out attrition this list. And so unfortunately turn 4 the collapse began. I couldn't deny my opponent any more primary points. So he got, you know, started racking the primary up there. And then turn 5, complete collapse. You know, my opponent went in turn 5, you know, basically, you know, not quite. You know, I had a few scattered survivors here and there, but my opponent like basically tabled me. You know, I think I probably in total had about 20 infantry here, there, all over the board. And my opponent still had many heavy hitters. He still had his Talos. He still had, I don't even know the names of some of his crap, but it was Grotesques, I think it might have been. Yeah, it was my opponent, you know, he just broke through. And unfortunately, with the bikes being able to zip over and mortal wound stuff, he started racking up some of the assassinate points as well. And the final score ended up being, and it was the last game and I was a little tired and I made a little mistake and it caused a 10-point swing. So the final score ended up being, I think, 93 points to my opponent and then 69 points to me. Now, a couple of things. I made one mistake where literally I just had to move, literally had to move 4 men, or like I think it was like 1 conscript onto an objective, and it would have scored me 5 more victory points and denied my opponent 5 more victory points. So I know I didn't do this, but if we just, it was sort of literally we were rushing the last couple of turns because his army has a lot going on and my army is big. So if you allow me the indulgence, dear viewers, to just say, let's say I moved that 1 conscript on, it wouldn't have affected the outcome of the game, but it would have just caused, you know, and that was literally a turn 5 move I could have done. It would have allowed me to cause a 10-point swing. And then there was a little bit of a funny moment when I should have been able to retrieve Octarius data and max it out. But my opponent said I couldn't fall back and do it, but I had argued that technically I wasn't in combat because consolidation happens at the end of his activation, and at that point I still had 5 conscripts strung out on the objective, and yeah, 4 of them ran away from morale, but that last one wasn't in engagement range. But it didn't really affect it was only more points for me. It didn't really affect the outcome of the game, so we just sort of forgot about it. But basically the final score, I should have had 5 more. I should have had 9 more victory points than that. But like I say, it was the last thing in the game. I didn't want to argue with my opponent over something, you know, like that. So what ended up happening was actually it would have been quite a big swing, to be fair, because no, it wouldn't. It would have been a 9-point. It would have been a 14-point swing. My opponent should have come down by 5 points if I just moved that conscript, and then I should have been able to retrieve Octarius data there as well. So if you take that into account, my opponent would have got like 88 points, and then I would have got 78 points. So actually, if we just take that into account, you know, please allow me that indulgence for a moment, viewers. If you like that, there was only a 10-point difference in it. You know, there's only a 10-point difference when you just take into account those couple of little niggles that happened at the end. You know, a couple of mistakes or confusions that happened at the end of the game. And again, just to be clear, I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression about, you know, my opponent or anything like that. We had I think 5 minutes or like 2 minutes to do turn 5. And we just decided not to argue about it because it wasn't going to affect the outcome of the game because it was clear he had won. So this is sort of a bit of post-game analysis there, kind of thing. But if we take that into account, you know, by that I mean like my opponent, you know, he just was like, oh, I've consolidated, and I was like, oh, don't, you know, let's not argue about it. We've only got a minute, kind of thing. But But if you allow me that little indulgence, it was only a 10-point difference between my army and my opponent's army, and that is Guard versus Dark Eldar. Okay, so I was super happy with that result. And when, like, you know, the dust has settled and everything, we managed to have a fight. You know, me and my opponent managed to, you know, switch the switches off and had a good, you know, sort of had a little chat about it afterwards. What my opponent said to me was like, well, that's the first game. That's the first game I played where I wasn't leading turn one. It was like, with this Dark Eldar army, normally I go in, I smash, and my opponent has to try, and they normally fail, to catch up. And in that game, I had my opponent on the ropes first 3 turns, and it was only that sort of last turn 4, turn 5 where things just collapsed, like the Guard just collapsed like a souffle. Then that sort of pulled it back for him. But, you know, if you, like I say, if you forgive me the little indulgence, that score very much could have easily been 78 to 88. You know, if we'd, you know, if just a couple of things had gone a little bit differently. As it was, you know, the official score. Don't want to deny my opponent. I think my official score was 69 points to me, 93 to him. But it could have been, like I say, you know, it could have been that quick. There could have been only a 10-point difference. And I just want to take a moment and, you know, and I do want to, you know, pat myself on the back and say, you know, pat Guard on the back, not me, you know, pat the Guard, the faction on the back and go, that wasn't a bad score. You know, one of the bottom tier armies going up against one of the top tier armies and coming out with only a 10, you know, potentially only a 10-point difference. And even, you know, that's really strong. You know, really strong. So, yeah, it was really good. It was really good as it was. It was only like a 24-point difference. It wasn't very much, but or whatever it was. But yeah, it was a really strong result, and I was really happy with how the army performed. So yeah, that was it. I went to let's do a summary. Let's summarize the whole thing. So yeah, that was it. That was the event, and the Guard went 1-1-1. 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw. I ended up placing 7th out of 16 people, so in the top half. And I had, you know, up until round 3, I'd fought my way up to the heady heights of table 2. Can't complain about that. So overall, I was really pleased with the performance of the Mordian 50th Rifles. I was really pleased with how the army performed. It looked good on paper. It performed well in reality. One thing I want to say is, I literally, in this event, I feel, and please let me know what you guys think, but I feel like I literally went up against the 3 top lists that are in the moment, you know, that are going at the moment. Obviously, you've got things like Admech and Sys, which are coming round the corner, but right now, in this snapshot in time, I feel like every single game was a hard game. You know, I had Death Guard with Termies, with Poxwalkers, with Volkite Dreads. I had Dark Angels, Terminators, Volkite Dreads. And then I went against Dark Eldar in the final game. You know, so it was really 3 absolute face melters. You know, and it was very much, I felt like I dived into the deep end of competitive play. And what I want to say is, you know, I'm really pleased with how the Guard performed. You know, I went up against every single hard, you know, competitive sort of 9th edition army out there. You know, I went against competitive Marines, competitive Death Guard, and Dark Eldar, which is just competitive from top to bottom. And I, you know, first game got a draw, second game got a win, and third game, as I don't want to labour the point too much, could have been only a 10-point difference. You know, if you look at dice rolls here and there, who could have known? Who would have known? You know, anything could have happened. So really happy with the performance of Guard. Is pure infantry viable? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I would say that, you know, you have to be fast. There were in every single game, you know, I had to speed play my last turn or 2. You know, it really speed. You know, sometimes I had 5 minutes for, you know, turn 4 and 5 minutes for turn 5. I just didn't bother even rolling a load of like attack dice. I just moved on to objectives and whatnot. However, this is the interesting thing. My turns took no longer than my opponent's turns, because whilst I had a really big army, it was super simple and very sort of, you know, homogenized. It was very standardized across the board. And my opponent's armies, whilst all much smaller than mine, were really complicated. They had to do loads of things. They had loads and loads of moving parts. So it balanced out. And every single one of my opponents was like, yeah, that was, you know, the tournament organizer came over, was like, are you guys okay for time? Any issues? And all my opponents were like, nope, absolutely fine. I had no pull-ups to the tournament organizer for timings on my side or anything like that. So it's interesting. Whilst the army was big and obviously, you know, took some time to do some of the turns, my opponents were no quicker than me. Even though one of their armies was only like 33 models, they were no quicker because they had all this reviving and command pointing. I've got to make him -1 damage, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. My opponent's command phases were very, very long in all 3 games. Maybe not Dark Eldar. The Dark Eldar just had long shooting phase and assault phase because they were doing so much in every phase. Yes, that was really interesting. What would I change about the list? What would I change? Well, firstly, I'm a bit 50-50 on the Psyker. I took the Psyker for Warp Ritual and then never ended up taking it because it was never been a good choice. First 2 games, my opponent would have just denied it, and in the last game, my opponent just basically killed the Psyker by flying over it. You know, maybe it would have helped. Maybe I could have got more, you know, than Warp Ritual, than no prisoners. You know, if I got Warp Ritual off 3 times and I hadn't made those, you know, and I got Rod off that last turn and whatnot, maybe I could have won the game. Who knows? Who knows? But, yeah, maybe it would have made it for the last game, but by and large, it wasn't a big deal. But what I would say is, you know, it wasn't. I didn't really need the Psyker, to say the least. Now, the other thing that's interesting is I'm not so sure about the plasma guns on the infantry squads. You know, most of the time I was moving around, slingshotting units onto objectives, or hiding them out of line of sight to hold objectives. I don't know if the plasma guns would have been worth it. You know what would have definitely been worth it? Voxcasters. Absolutely. So that's just something to be aware of. I definitely think Voxcasters would have been a viable choice here, because I would have been able to protect my characters. I wouldn't have had to risk any assassinate points at any point in that last game, for example. So yeah, who knows? If I'd taken Voxcasters and had Warp Ritual, maybe that last game could have been a win. Who knows? But yeah, all I want to say is that it was a really, really, really good event. I was really happy with how the army performed. Massive thank you again to the tournament organisers. Not really much changes to make to the list. You know, maybe take the Psyker out, maybe swap the Voxes, you know, the Plasma for Voxes. But really, the list performed really, really well. However, what would have happened if I'd taken Scions and played all 3 of those games? Well, I definitely think I would have won the first game if I'd had Scions. And I definitely think and I would have won the second game if I'd had Scions as well. Because I would have done similar stuff. I would have just had the firepower. Third game, who knows? That would have been a tricky one. Poor man's Dark Eldar versus actual Dark Eldar would have been funny. But I definitely think Scions are the better choice. This army is how you can run regular guard. If you want to run regular guard and have a snowball chance in hell, go pure infantry, go special weapon spam, do that. If you want an easier life though, you want to paint less models and still be just as competitive, if not just an easier army to pilot, then Scions is the way to go. Scions is absolutely the way to go. Now, unfortunately, little caveat, or little extra sort of, you know, bonus round. Alex, who ran the pure tank list, now bear in mind it was his first tournament, so that's always a bit of a culture shock. He unfortunately went 0-3. But a big part of that was the terrain. He was a firepower-based army, and his opponents could basically hide from all his firepower. But, silver lining, the Makaris Vanquisher was fantastic. First game, killed a Contemptor Dreadnought in one go, because he Vengeance Facadia'd against... he played Death Guard first game, Vengeance Facadia, bam, took off a Dreadnought. Second turn, or whatever, you know, the next, it's also got a Demon Prince kill, bam. The flat damage 9 on the Makaris Vanquisher was fantastic. Fantastic. In the second game, he took out, I think it was two War Dogs and a double for Heavy Flamer Chimera. So that was, you know, pretty cool. And in the third game, basically, it took the whole game, but over the course of the game, it just deleted a unit of Sanguinary Guard, just launching uranium darts into them. But yeah, guys, that's the tournament. So, you know, placed really well. Really pleased with the performance. Let me know what you guys think. I know this is a really long video, but I intentionally did it as a long format video, so you could, you know, paint and do whatever you want to do. Stick it on in the background. I just wanted to go through in quite fine detail my first tournament in 9th edition using pure Infantry Guard, which I've not had a chance to use since I started this restoration project over 2 years ago. And the Mordians came out of their restoration project and absolutely smashed it on their first event. So I was really happy with how it performed. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you like the format of the video. I've tried to make sure the pictures are all in the right order and whatnot and relevant. Let me know what you think. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you have, if you've watched this entire video and got to the end and you've enjoyed what you've watched, please consider heading on over to the Patreon page. My ability to go to tournaments is entirely funded by the awesome Patreon supporters. I do have several events lined up between now and the end of the year. And I think the Mordians have acquitted themselves very well. But I think the next one I'm going to go to, if the army's ready in time, I'm going to take Scions. And we'll see how they do at the event. If the army's not ready in time, I might take my Steel Legion. Or, crazy, I might take the old Black Templars. So we'll see what happens. Or, even crazier, I might take the Gene Stealer Cult. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider signing up to the Patreon. There will be a link down in the description below. Hope you have enjoyed everything. Thank you for watching. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.